Hello, welcome to the channel. My name is Castle Goblin and this is the Goblin Cave. For this week's TTRPG book club, we are going a little bit old school with the game that I started role-playing with all that 20 plus years ago. We're having a look at Call of Cthulhu 7th edition Quick Start rules. So you can pick up this in DriveThruRPG as a PDF format, or you can pick it up as a printed out format from various places. I actually have the printed up one myself. I really like it. I picked it up for about $5, so it's not really expensive. And it gives you a really good basic overview of Call of Cthulhu's system for the 7th edition, and also gives you the haunting or the Corbett House scenario, which I absolutely love on the channel. We've done it about 8 times on the channel, and just absolutely amazing. I would highly suggest backing it up with Syrinscape audio, which we're using now. We're using the Syrinscape sci-fi, the speakeasy 1920s, shaking it. But for the haunting, highly recommend the normal fantasy version of Syrinscape with the deserted house, because it really adds the tension to that little scenario. But we're not going to go through the scenario today. We're actually going to go through the quick rules here, and then I'll go a few bits and pieces as well, just a little bit more details, because the rules are actually really simple to pick up when we run these scenarios for the haunting, etc. on the channel. We're usually in about 5 to 10 minutes of actually saying, hey, this is the rules, have you got any questions? And half of that is usually questions, but the rules are very simple. So as you can see across from the other side over here, the Call of Cthulhu is a basic role-playing. Call of Cthulhu uses pretty much a variation of the basic role-playing system. There's a little bit of changes from the basic role-playing system as it's now in the 7th edition, but it's very much still at its core. It's a investigation horror in the Lovecraftian universe, so you're looking at ancient horrors and things like that, and just cults and things like that going on. And you can have them in things like the Roman Empire, you can have in World War II Empire, modern sci-fi, everything else, Gaslight, which is 1890, or the 1920s, which is the most common era, but there are lots of different eras that you can play through and lots of different source materials that's out there over the years, and they're all pretty much forward or backwards compatible, where you can use the 7th edition rules for things that were printed for 4th edition, etc., because the rules haven't changed so much. The rules, they're just added a few things here and there, but they're very much similar right across the board. So Chaosism is the actual company, Chaosism Inc. They've been around for 30 odd years. They are amazing, and they are really they're the first, Call of Cthulhu is usually the first input of instance of the Cthulhu mythos or the Lovecraftian horrors and something like that. So they're a really good gateway into that universe, and though you do have Call of Cthulhu products, or Call of Cthulhu references, I should say, in other game systems, this is the main game system that they run through. So you can check them out at www.chaosism.com, and also, if, as I said before, DriveThruRPG has this for free, so go and check it out yourself. It's really cool. So the game itself, in its most basic form, is a percentage-based system. So what I mean by a percentage-based system is that all your stats, all your skills, etc., are based out of 100, and so if you've got 50 in a skill, you have a 50% chance of beating it or failing. So that's how it kind of works. When you're rolling a skill check or things like that, what you're doing is you're rolling 2d10. One's a 10's dice, one's a 1's dice, and you're trying to equal or get lower than your actual skill or attribute, etc. And it's a really basic way of doing things. So if your attribute is, say, 70, you've got a 70% chance of success. It's really that clear. Now, in 7th edition, they've added a few things like degrees of success, and the degrees of success doesn't always make things more clearer, as in if you get an extreme success on something that really doesn't give you that extra bonus for that, it doesn't really matter. But in some circumstances, it does actually matter, where an extreme success, the keeper could just give you a little bit more information, or have something done just a little bit better than what a normal success is. So the degrees of success is failure. So there's critical failure, succeed, hard success, and a extreme success. And so you've got about 50% of your skill is for hard success, and then about 20% is your extreme success. So that's kind of how it works out. And for the most part, you don't really need to know them, except for when you're doing opposed rolls. So if you fail to actually complete your skill, but you failed by just a little bit, you actually have something called luck. So your investigator character sheet has a luck stat, and you can burn that luck. So you can spend your luck to then just to pass, or if you're really close to an extreme success, and you know that's going to make a difference, so you can spend your luck to then just push that over the edge to get a better success. So no problem. And so it's a really, really basic system like that, and those luck points don't really come back really quickly, and so it's kind of a really fun one to use, because it does say in this book itself that don't get upset about choosing a random target for like damage or things like that. Just use the person, or just find the person with the lowest luck, and their luck's run out, they're the new target. So I really like that. It's that you've got this resource, but you're burning away, and it does come back to haunt you when you run out, or when you have less luck than other people around. So that's kind of how it works for that. If you choose not to spend your luck, you can always push a roll and try to attempt a failed roll a second time, but you need to actually be able to come across that roll or in a different situation, as in if you are trying to persuade someone to give you information or to let you into some place, and your persuasion fails, but you don't have enough luck to, or you don't want to spend your luck to then have a success there, you could try to push the roll, and you could try to go, okay, well, I've tried the nice way, and now I'm going to threaten the person. So that's a way of actually pushing that roll to try a different skill, but you need to try to justify that skill and justify the different changes of technique. And the charisma is a really good way of doing that, say with the persuasion to intimidate or things like that. And there's lots of different ways of doing persuasion. There's in fast talk as well, and there's things like that. So again, if you fail a roll though, if you fail a pushed roll, it's always going to end disastrous. So if in that circumstance, if you're trying to intimidate after failing a persuasion, and you fail again for your intimidate roll when you've pushed it, the person's probably going to call the police or thump you, which is a really nice setback. So there's always a bad result if you fail that pushed roll. So that's your kind of penalty of probably not a good idea to do that. But there's a risk, and sometimes it's worth that risk. Because if you fail a roll, it might be a vital piece of information. It may be something really crucial, at least to your mind. And it's maybe worth that risk, at least you think. Now, so that's your basics there, all done. That's your basics of Call of Cthulhu. In Call of Cthulhu, though, they've got a system which is a bit different from most, and that's sanity. So the sanity system in Call of Cthulhu is really brilliant. It is more of a case of there's a lot of weird stuff going on, and your mind doesn't really cope with that. So you have a sanity thing. You have a sanity stat. If you see a poltergeist, or see things that are flying around the rooms in like spooky things, like that can't be real. So you ask for a sanity roll. If you fail that roll, you may actually, you take some sanity damage, so that goes down. Even if you've passed the roll, you take a little bit of sanity damage as well. Not as much though. And so what happens that if you take too much sanity damage, it could be so much that you get how can I put it? You get something, or your brain kind of snaps, and you get a small little setback, and it can be really good. Like you could just drop your flashlight or something like that. But also, if you realize that what you did or what just happened is how can I put it? If you realize what just happened actually did happen, so there's another role that can add into there as well, which is an intelligence role, that's the only one you want to actually fail. But if you actually notice, oh wait, no, that's wrong, the world doesn't work like that, or objects shouldn't be flying around the room, then you can actually get more permanent or longer term insanity instead of just a temporary insanity. And that really plays into things really fun, because when that starts happening, you can actually have the GM start rewriting your background, because your attachment to reality starts to slip. So when we're talking about rewriting the backgrounds, you may totally forget you have a sibling, or you may think that you were raised in a different country, just things like that. And as you slip from reality, your background also changes, and you need to start following your background, even though that's not what you know as a player that's happened. But you work with the GM to go, okay, no, this is now what's changed. This sounds like it works. So I really like that. It's been around for a long time, and they've always written it really well in the game. So we're going to flick through a few things here. Let's get into the actual book itself. So again, Call of Cthulhu, 7th edition quick start rules. That's the look of the book, and that's what I've got here. So it's actually a 48-page book. The rules themselves maybe about 5 pages. It's really, really simple, as I've just explained pretty much all the rules right then. So we'll scroll down. We'll go to here. It's like, there we go. So hope you enjoy this Chaosism publication. Thank you for purchasing the PDF from chaosism.com. You can, as I said, go to DriveThruRPG. It's free. It's awesome. So Call of Cthulhu quick start rules. The oldest and strongest emotion of fear is... the oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear. And there's Lovecraft himself, who looks really creepy, because he kind of is. And just a spoiler alert, also quite racist. So just a heads up there. So Call of Cthulhu is Chaosism's classic role-playing game of Lovecraftian horror, in which ordinary people are confronted by terrifying and alien forces of the Cthulhu mythos. Call of Cthulhu is published by Chaosism.com. The original publishers of the paper role-playing games have been around for 30 years. Chaosism is famous for excellence of game design and have won many games industry awards, etc., etc. So they have, they're not just blowing their own trumpet, they are that good. And the stories are just amazing. They just really, really well done. So I won't go through the whole welcome to Call of Cthulhu. You can copy and you can pause it and read it later. But there's something I want to put down on the next page. And this is the winners and losers all the way down the bottom here. So, winners and losers. In Call of Cthulhu, there are no winners and losers in the standard competitive sense. Play is usually cooperative. Participants work together to attain a common goal, to discover and foil a nefarious plot being perpetrated by minions of some dark cult or secret society. The opposition that the investigators face will often be alien or hostile situation by an... The opposition that the investigators will face is often alien or hostile situation controlled by an impartial keeper, not another player. And so the idea here is that you're not actually a superhero. When they talk about keeper, in Call of Cthulhu, the games master or the dungeon master is referred to as the keeper. So, but you're not actually superheroes. You're just people. You're people who are just thrust into this adventure, thrust into this investigation of what is going on. And it's all actually about that investigation. So the old adage in Call of Cthulhu is that in Call of Cthulhu games, you either die or you go insane. And usually in that order, which sounds really strange. On rare occasions, you can complete and thwart the situation and thwart the actual threat to humanity or etc. But that's not really easy to do. This is a game of taking notes. It's a game of investigation. It's a game of uncovering clues and asking the right questions as well. So it is not player friendly. Death happens really quickly. If there's a firefight, someone is going to die or someone is going to get really, really, really messed up. And with healing in the 1920s or in the gaslight era of 1890s, it's a very slow process. So if you get hurt seriously enough, you may just have to retire that character as they spend 6 to 12 months in hospital recovering from those wounds. So it's a really, really dangerous situation, and I really like it. It's a case where you might have like a just sway of not just one character, but like 5 or 6 characters who are like related to each one. Like, say, a friend of mine did a flying ace from the First World War, and when that character accidentally died from some cultist, he brought in another character who's another flying ace, and he had a squadron of flying aces of prepared characters, and each one were different people. Each character was different, but there was the same theme of his characters throughout an entire campaign, and it was actually quite entertaining. So the idea is that everything is very, very dangerous and risky. Just wanted to point that out. And succeeding, even if you succeed, you may succeed a scenario and just spend the rest of your life in jail because you've thwarted the world, but that's all hidden secrets that no one knew about. What you did to thwart the cult who was going to destroy the world is obvious and is a criminal action. So things like that happen, and you can't just go around the streets wielding weapons because that's illegal. It's very much a game of modern policing and things like that. So you can't just kill someone if that's really bad. So we won't go into the creating the investigator because that's always a minefield and takes quite a bit there. So we're going to skip through that, and we'll go to the game systems itself. As I said, I've already pretty much gone through it already. So skills. So game system skills may be called for during dramatic situations in a game. Walking down a well-lit hall is not a very dramatic situation, whereas running down a rubble-strewn corridor while being chased by monsters definitely is. When attempting a skill roll, you should agree with your keeper. You should agree a goal with the keeper. If your skill is successful, you have achieved your goal. Additionally, when you successfully roll a given skill, put a check mark on that box on your investigator's sheet. So what that is for is at the end of a scenario or adventure, etc., or even just a couple of little scenarios, you go back and you actually roll for experience. So it's a classless game. You don't have any classes at all, and you're not given experience. You go up in skill sometimes from things that you've used. So the idea here is if you have a 50% chance of library use. Yes, library use is a really important skill. And you use that in the game and you succeed and get some critical vital information. You then click that tick box, and so when it comes to leveling, what happens is that you actually have to roll to fail that skill. So you still have a 50-50 chance. And if you fail that skill, then your skill will go up by a random dice. It used to be D4. It can be, I can't remember the current names or the current edition. I think it might be D8. But it goes up a little bit. So the idea is that if you've got 90 in a skill and you pass and then you've got a tick box, it's very hard to then increase that because you have to fail a skill of 90%. So you have to get that last 10% to actually fail it to then go up. But a skill with only 10%, if you pass it in a critical situation and you put that tick box in, when it comes time to leveling up, you got a 90% chance of increasing that skill. So it's actually useful to use skills which you may not be ideal for, and I really like that idea. And again, you can always push a roll. So if you push a roll, then you could try to do something with your lower skill amount first, and then push a roll with the higher skill amount later. But there's always that risk if you fail that second roll, if you fail that pushed roll, then things can go very bad very quickly. So skill rolls and difficulties. So your keeper will tell you when you should attempt a skill roll and how difficult the task is. Regular task requires that you roll equal to or under your stat itself. A hard success. A difficult task requires that you roll equal to or less than half of your ability, and that is a harder one. And there's also an extreme version as well. So the GM or keeper I should say, can say, well, this is actually going to be a hard test. You actually need to make that hard success to pass that, or extreme. So on those situations where, yes, it's technically possible you can make that check, but it's very, 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 very unlikely, then the keeper will just say, look, it's going to be an extreme success or extreme check. You need to get an extreme success to pass. And again, you can spend your luck or push the rolls, but again, pushing rolls, not always ideal, but can lead to some very funny results. So there's also bonus and penalty dice. So what that happens there is very similar to things like Dungeons and Dragons, where you get like an extra d20. In this, you get an extra d10, and you pick the best or you pick the worst. So what happens there is you've got two dice. You've got a tens dice, and you've got a ones dice, and I'll kind of explain how that works. So the ones dice go from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The tens dice go from 0, 0. So 0, 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. Now, if you roll a 5 on the ones dice, and you roll a 0, 0 on the tens dice, that is 5. So 0, 0, 5 becomes 5. If you roll 50 on the tens dice and 0 on the ones dice, then that is 50. But what happens is if you roll 0, 0 on the tens dice and you roll 0 on the ones dice, that's 100. Because that's how we represent 100 in the game. So that's a bad one. So that's kind of how that works. It's really a nice... It's a simple system when you get used to it. And if you're using systems like Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds, everything's automatically implemented and it'll just tell you your result and if you succeeded, failed, or the level of success that you had. So I like that all those, like for those online systems that we use ourselves, it's a really nice way of just having to not think about it. But if you are around a table rolling actual physical dice, which I'm really jealous of, it's a really, really simple way you get used to it. Like you really get used to it easily. So it's got down here, you've got the worst, which is fail, you've got regular success, hard success, extreme success. And that's really nice to clearly have it there. So for your bonus and penalty dice, going back to that, you get an extra d10. So you roll your normal d10 and you roll your normal tens dice and your ones dice, and then you roll a second tens dice. And if you've got advantage or bonus on that, then what happens is you choose the best of those. If you've got that as a penalty, you choose the worst of the tens dice. So that's how that one kind of works. And you can have more than one bonus dice as well. So you get your bonuses from having someone assist you in a roll, and that can even happen in a push roll. Someone can then try to assist you for a push roll, but that circumstance, that risk, is then shared by those two characters. Or try, say, climbing with a rope, you might get a bonus dice for that because you're now using an implement that's fit for that duty. So things like that kind of work really well. Or if someone's helping you do your research or helping you find something, you could probably be given a bonus dice for that. So these are the dice rolls. This is what we're talking about. So we've got the D10s, which is the 20. That'll be 24. And if that is a bonus dice, that'll be 44. And the better one of that is 24. If it's a penalty dice, that'll be... Okay, now I've seen what they've done here, yeah. So they put if it's a bonus dice, you're using these two. If it's a failed dice, so a penalty dice, using the higher of the two. That's how they've got it done there. So it's always a tens dice, which is the extra one as well. So here we've got sanity. Sanity is the fun part. I really like. It's an amazing system. So whenever you encounter horrors of the mythos, they come across something mundane yet horrific, such as stumbling across your best friend murdered, then yeah, you actually have to roll a sanity check. And sanity check can be really interesting. Failing a lot of them can just lead to disastrous situations. So you need to roll under, so if you need to roll under your sanity, and even if you pass that sanity roll, sometimes you can still take sanity loss. But if you fail, you're always going to take more. So as I've got an example here, the sanity could be listed in the book as 0 slash 1d6. So if you pass, you're going to lose 0, but if you fail, you're going to lose 1d6. Or it could be something like 2 slash 2d6, or 2 slash 1d10, where even if you pass, you're still losing 2, but if you fail, you can lose up to 1d10. So that's kind of important there. If an investigator loses 5 or more sanity points as a consequence of a single sanity roll, he or she has suffered a major emotional trauma. The player must roll a d100. If the result is equal to or less than their intelligence, the investigator fully understands what has been seen and goes temporarily insane. So I love that this is something that can really do things. And in that circumstance, either the GM or the GM and the player can just agree on kind of what their temporary insanity is, and there are full-on rules in the full rule book about the temporary insanities and what they mean, the actual diagnosis, what their effects are. This is how I learned psychology as a young boy. Oh god, I feel bad saying as a young boy. When I played this the first time, because you've got insanities, and you read through the books like, these are really interesting. There's a difference between, there's kleptomania, they're just really fascinating to read. And they're, of course, really well written, and makes it easy for you to actually role play that. So the keeper can just give you that section of, this is what this insanity means, and this is what you have to play out. So I really, really like that. And again, down here it says, unfortunately, regaining lost sanity is a long, arduous process. It doesn't come back easily. There's a long time for that. So I do like that it's a big thing. So in combat, in at least the quick start edition, you can do something. There's no, you have 3 actions, or you have a movement, an attack action, or a bonus action, etc. No, you can just do something. You can move up to you how many movements you have, and you can do a significant action. So it just makes things really simple, especially as a quick start rules, that you can just do something, and whatever you need to do, it happens. Like you might need to do checks for it, but you're the one that's actually saying, well, actually, this is what I plan on doing. If you succeed, then yes, you have done that. Great. Now, the flow of the round is actually controlled by the keeper, and there's no real hard and fast moves for movement. There may actually be some in the bigger book, but this is the quick start rules we're looking for. So the other things that are happening is for initiative is there's no rolling for initiative. So initiative is common through pretty much all role-playing games, at least most of the ones all the ones I've at least read, that there's no rolling for initiative. It just goes by who has the highest dex, and you work your way down. And there's of course things about ties and things like that. I just usually go for, if there's a tie from the player's point of view, the players can just choose who goes first in each time they go through it. That's just how I usually do it across most systems. Or you can do it for if it's one with the GM and the player, I always do the GM, or in this case keeper, as the one, because I'm evil when I'm running a game. And that's kind of how I like it. And in Call of Cthulhu, it is about laying false leads and distracting the players and distracting the characters, and really putting stresses on them when you can, putting them into a false sense of security, and then have the cultists or whatever jump out and attack. There's a lot of psychological play going into it, and that's actually why I really like Call of Cthulhu, because I like the psychological manipulation as a keeper. I know that sounds really nasty, but it really is fun. Because while you're cooperative storytelling, yes, you're also actively working against the player characters, because they're trying to thwart your evil doings. So rules for fighting. Whoops, the go down to here. Every time you are attacked, you may choose to fight back, attempt to avoid, block, or parry the attack, making your own one. So while making one of your own, or dodge and attempt to just completely avoid the attack entirely. So if someone's trying to punch you, you can attempt to fight back. So essentially, you try to hit them back or counter-attack them in that situation. So both the there we go. So both the attacker and defender roll a percentage dice and compare their levels of success. If you're fighting. So if you are fighting back, use your fighting skill. You need to achieve a higher level of success than your attacker. If you're dodging, use your dodge skill, and your attacker needs to achieve a higher level of success than you. So fighting back is exactly that. If you're trying to defend yourself for fighting back, if you beat their attack with your attack, then they actually cop damage. Or with dodging, they actually have to beat your dodge in that circumstance. So you can actually, combat gets dangerous even if you're an attacker, you can cop damage on your round as the attacker. And I really like that. So weapons, you've got unarmed, you've got the bits and pieces there. So what it says about damage bonus, the damage bonus is essentially the size of your character, and I believe it's your size and strength combined, and you can get extra damage on certain things. Usually it wouldn't be a D8, but maybe like a D3 or maybe D2, D3 or D4. Like you wouldn't get a huge amount. I know that sounds really small for figures, but you don't have many hit points in Call of Cthulhu. Hit points maybe 12, 14 would be amazing. So when you see those damages like a handgun of D10, you can kind of see just how quickly you can die or how quickly a character can die. So a shotgun, 4d6 at close range. Yeah. That type of thing. You can lose a character really, really quickly. And also extreme successes on certain weapons do extreme damage too. So yeah, that's the thing. So firearms rules. Readied firearms act as the dex plus 50 when it comes to determining your turn order. So if you start the turn, you start combat with a readied weapon, then your dex gets your order gets pushed up by 50. So it actually does give you that advantage, and it pushes you up the top of the order, which is a really nice way of going. The person was ready, they have like this bonus without having to do the full surprise round, etc. And so firing two or three shots from a handgun in one round is okay, but you get a penalty die for each shot, and at point blank range, 1/5 of your dex in feet, you gain a bonus dice. So if you're really point blank range, you get a bonus for shooting combat, but there's other things like that. By firing multiple shots, you get disadvantage on every single roll, and that's the 2d10 taking the worst. So there's fighting maneuvers as well, like knocking opponents to the floor, seizing hold of an opponent, really nice things like that. Disarming opponent, they've got rules for it, and the rules are actually pretty damn good. They're actually built conducive to the system. A lot of game systems fail when it comes to grappling and maneuvers like that, because their system isn't built for that. The system is built for hand-to-hand combat, for ranged combat. Is not built for nuanced combat. And I like that this one does have that, and it's pretty good actually. So the other thing is that injury and healing. Characters without a major wound heal 1 hit point per day. Characters with a major wound must make a healing roll using their con at the end of each week. That's each week to heal, that is. And you only gain 1d3 hit points for that time, or 2d3 for an extreme success. So if you have a major wound, you're going to heal very, very, very slowly. First aid can heal 1 hit point. If the first aid is used on a dying character, it does nothing but, again, does not confer the immediate gain of hit points, but it extends the character's life, so that a medical check can be used later. Medicine can heal 1d3 hit points, but it takes at least an hour of appropriate treatment and supplies. So we've got things down here. So minor injuries. So a person could survive numerous occurrences of this level of injury. So 1d3. So examples: kicks, headbutts, punches, etc. Mild acid, smoky, breathing smoke, atmosphere, things like that. So moderate, 1d6. Falling 10 feet onto the grass, club, strong acid, breathing in water, is D6 damage, which is pretty... exposure to vacuum, small caliber bullet, arrow, etc. Severe 1d10s. These are the 38 caliber bullets, falling 10 feet on concrete, axes, fire, etc. Being 6 to 10 yards from exploding hand grenades. Yep, hand grenades are a thing because, yeah, it's just after the First World War, so they're about, and there's also stuff for the Second World War as well. So deadly, 2d10, so the person has a 50% chance of dying. Yeah, that's just bad. So that's hit by a car 30 miles an hour, being 3 to 6 yards from an exploding device or hand grenade, etc. Very strong poison. Strong poison. So terminal, outright death is likely, which is 4d10. So hit by a speeding car, being within 3 yards of an exploding device or stick of dynamite, lethal poison, of course, and splat. Outright death is almost certain, 8d10. So technically you can roll 8 and still survive, or maybe 9 or 10. But again, your hit points may be only like 10, 12, 13. So you're pretty much going to be going. So that's being involved in a high-speed head-on collision, being hit by a train, etc. Yeah. I love the artwork. It is so gorgeous. So we won't get into that because that's the scenario. Looks like. Yep, that's the scenario. So as I said, it's a really quick how to learn the game. There's nothing really complex about it. It's a D100 system. A lot of people might not be used to D100 systems, but they're actually really good. And I just really like it. The depth of the stories, the amount of content that is out there, and because the rule set is backwards compatible with all its previous content, I mean, the new big changes in the 7th edition is the bonus dice and penalty dice, and the degrees of success, putting in hard and extreme. They always had extreme, but now just putting in hard in the middle there. So there's not that many big changes. You can easily run that on the fly when like using previous editions material. And for 30 years of publishing, there's a lot of editions of material out there. There's some amazing adventures and massive campaigns like the Orient Express, Terra Australis, and other bits like Mask of Neothotep. So there's some really amazing content out there. There's a lot of one-shots. There's a lot of small mini-games. If you pick up the starter book, or the starter box set, they have solo games. They have smaller games and a really good scenario, which gets like several scenarios that can be linked together to be a mini campaign in itself. So there's a lot of content out there. Highly recommend it. As I said, I don't get to play this very often. I don't get to run it very often, but this is my start in role playing. This is what drew me in. Not Dungeons and Dragons. I was drawn in by Call of Cthulhu. Even though I played a lot more Dungeons and Dragons 2nd edition than pretty much anything else, this is what got me in, and this is just a really, really great game. I can't recommend any higher. It just really blows me away that people do not play this game as much. And again, if you use something like Syrinscape, you can really push the narrative and push the horror and push the scenes as well. I also love, as I said, having false leads in investigator games is cool. My friends, when they were playing, they followed a false lead for like 3 sessions. That was just the GM just putting in a false lead because he thought it would be worth it. He thought it was a good situation, and the player characters followed it and just went sidetracked until they found it was a dead end, and then they had to come back and try to figure out which part went wrong along the process. So I everything about this game absolutely adore, everything absolutely love, and I would love to have more content on things like Roll20, which is the primary platform that we use. I do know they have a lot of content on Fantasy Grounds, but I think it's some of the older content, and we want to try to move through the times with the newer ones. So yeah, that's kind of it, and it's a very short one today. So if you liked it, press like. If you disliked it, also press like, because it makes me still happy inside. Have you played Call of Cthulhu before? Have you survived a Call of Cthulhu game before, because that's a rarity. Leave your comments down below, and always subscribe and ring that bell for future notifications. So yeah, this is going to be a very small one for the day. So for me, that's bye.